Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and I hope all of you are having a great day and we can make it a little bit better. And I know that a lot of you, you send in your emails and you say that, we help you get through either your workout or your commute or things like that. And so I usually say, to help you through your work day. And I realize now that, not everyone listens to us, at our scheduled time slot. We join you doing a lot of different activities. So, I hope all of them are going well. So today on the show, for anyone out there who has not checked the show notes yet, we have a great one for you today, as we have a regular correspondent here. And that of course, is Mr. Dariush Derakhshani. And he's joining us to talk all about a couple of different topics, and one that is particularly kind of relevant lately, and that's because over the past couple of weeks we've had a number of guests on the show that actually have their own artificial intelligence businesses, and the idea of artificial intelligence, we've discussed it with people who are providing the services, we've discussed it with people who are afraid of it, we've discussed it with people who are embracing it, and we're going to take a look at how that's going to be affecting the artistic space, because, a lot of people thought that this was one place that, AI would not be able to touch for a long, long time. And it's the idea that, the human mind and creativity and things like that are just not easy to, code for. But hey, we're seeing some tendrils even work their way into the creative space. So joining us again, Dariush Derakhshani. But before we get to that, a few things to mention, including computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything from the show notes, which include links to our guests, any articles that we do, any topics that we discuss. We have links in the show notes. That also includes the live video feed where you can watch Computer America and not just listen. And it also includes the contest. That's right. So if you want to enter the contest, which is sponsored, of course, by Logitech, and you want to win one of their great prizes, well, we give them away every single Friday. And hey, we could be calling your name out if you are so thoughtful as to enter to win. So with all that being said, why don't we just go ahead and skip on over to today's guest? And again, longtime listeners, no stranger, Dariush Derakhshani. He's been here with us for a number of months now, and probably multiple years. I have to go back and double check. But at any rate, Dariush Derakhshani, he is a visual effects supervisor and, of course, a professor in Southern California. So, Dariush, thank you for coming on Computer America.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be fun because you picked a number of topics that, like I said, only getting more relevant, and it's an exciting space because it's a space that we really don't know the extent at which it's going to, kind of take over. And of course, I'm, alluding to artificial intelligence and the idea that, computer programs are getting to the point where they can learn by themselves and do tasks that are more complicated than, just simple if-then statements. So, before we get started here, why don't we, how are you? How are you, Dariush? How have you been these last couple of weeks?
I've been pretty good, thank you. Certainly busy with some classes that I'm teaching starting up lately, and just a few other training assignments and a few online classes that I'm trying to wrap up. So it's been a busy couple of weeks, which is always a good problem to have, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Better than sitting around and wondering when the new iPhone's coming out. which
Yeah,
is
exactly.
where we find ourselves here at Computer America,
That's right.
once in a while. So why don't we go ahead and jump into this? So, again, for anyone out there, if you want to check out what we're talking about in more detail, well, we're going to do a pretty good job ourselves, but we're going to be linking the articles in the show notes for you to check out at your leisure. And yeah, Darius, you sent over a couple of articles that were, very, very interesting, and not all artificial intelligence. Some of them are just, different tools that maybe animators in the future will be able to use. So I'll let you decide which of these three articles you wanted to start with.
Yeah, I thought it would be kind of fun to start with Disney's Magic Bench. This is news that is sort of from the end of July and into the early August about this augmented reality experience that Disney had been working on, or Disney Research, which basically has you not wearing a goggles. You're not putting something on your face to put you inside an environment in a first person sense. What you're doing is you're sitting on this bench and you're watching yourself in a third person sort of situation where you see a screen where you see yourself on that bench with a character there that's of course animated, and you can interact with that character in the situation, which sort of takes the idea of augmented reality and puts it into a different perspective, like the third person, where you can see yourself doing things.
Hmm.
We've, I'm sure, discussed, and listeners certainly are aware of the potential of VR, putting in a situation where you can do things like remote surgery. I think we talked about a few episodes ago where a surgeon across the world or doctor across the world could be using VR to put themselves in with their patient, where they're guiding the actual care of that person physically in another location. So this opens up a few avenues, and I've always been really interested in the educational implications of VR and AR. And this is one of those things that has a very wide commercial, educational, even military, sports. All these things could put a user into a different context. So instead of being in a first person, you're now seeing yourself in a different situation. Like, for example, if these Netflix type clothing companies like Gwynnie B
Hmm.
that that sends you a few dresses a month, and you can swap out, and you can keep a clean wardrobe going. This lends itself nicely to actually visualizing yourself in some fashion, or wearing a dress without actually doing it, by standing in front of your webcam, running whatever software that somebody, I'm sure, is working on, and visualizing yourself in the third person wearing that dress before you actually buy that thing. And I think this is where e-commerce may be headed, where you can picture yourself doing or wearing or having whatever something is without actually, having it in your hands
You
in
know,
a brick and mortar store.
Yeah, and that is it's kind of funny that you mentioned it, because I'm recalling an interview that we had with an Israeli company, and it completely escapes me, because they're a company that they developed a some software that worked well enough on an iPhone or any kind of smartphone, kind of comparable to an iPhone, that could you could take your measurements through your phone,
Hmm.
and and then those measurements could be shipped off to any of these clothing stores, and then you could buy clothes online, where hey, it wasn't it where you'd be able to make them fit better, I guess, is the point.
Sure,
And
right.
yeah, and I remember having that interview like a year and a half ago. So when you say, this is kind of where it's heading, like the technology has been worked on, and it's not only kind of where it's heading, it's already possible. It's just, how interested do you think people are going to be in actually using a service like this?
I think with so much retail moving into the digital online space, you're starting to see retailers having stores that don't have inventory. Like in a way, Amazon's opening some brick and mortar stores. There's one close to, well, not really close to me, but in my sort of neighborhood in Westwood in Los Angeles, near the UCLA campus, where you can buy something on Amazon and then pick it up at that retail location. I think that's something that retailers are probably looking into, having a smaller physical footprint, but still maybe having a footprint where users can come and experience some of the products that they have firsthand and ordering it through their mega warehouses in some state or country different than where they are now. I think one of the next evolutionary steps, you go to a clothing store, like if I'm looking for a new suit, I'll go to, Men's Warehouse, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I'll try something on. I'll be standing in one of those areas that's got the mirrors all around you, so you can, check out how big your butt really is. And
Right.
why wouldn't you be able to do that in sort of a VR environment where you step into this platform where instead of these mirrors, you've got an augmented mirror. So without actually putting the suit on, what it does is it reads your physical appearance. It can measure out, and I'll explain a little bit about this and the idea of photogrammetry in a moment,
Sure.
but it'll measure you out. It'll fit you with the styles that they have available online. You can try on a few things digitally in an augmented reality way. And this magic bench from Disney Research had sort of sparked my thinking cap, I guess, in a way of saying, well, how is this going to benefit the average mom and pop that are out there looking to buy something online? Buying clothes online, that's really tough. I hesitate, and I'm a guy, I have a style, polo shirts and jeans, and I have a size. Those are the only two things. But people that are more fashionable than I am, and that's like lots of other people out there,
Right.
um, they wonder exactly how it's going to fit them and what it's going to look like. And going to a store and trying all these things on costs money in having inventory on hand, costs time for sales associates, costs you time. So if you're able to step into this sort of AR pod like this magic bench, you can see yourself wearing a whole bunch of different stuff really very quickly, and then being able to send that off and have this company ship it to you a day or two later, as opposed to having it on the rack taking up valuable retail
So,
space.
yeah.
I think that's a good mix of the brick and mortar retail and the e-commerce solution coming together to still give people that tactile, I'm there and I'm seeing it or I'm touching it,
Mhm.
and the cost efficiencies of having all this stuff be elsewhere in
Right.
one more centralized warehouse location.
Right. And just a couple points to, kind of tack onto yours. It's that, it's not even so much do, our customers going to want this kind of thing, or is Gap all hell Gap going to remain the same for the next 50 years? Like you make a very good point where if you can utilize these kinds of technologies and go into the future, then you're going to save your company a lot of money. And then at some point, it's only going to make sense that, things are done this way because, hey, you don't have to hire everyone to work with inventory, to work returns, to, work, XYZ. It's only going to make, kind of business sense to use these kinds of technologies. And just real quick, so you're saying that this idea of the Disney Magic Bench kind of idea, but with the clothing pod, uh, so it's kind of like the Amazon is like the Amazon like wardrobe or Amazon Face, Amazon Video, something like that. That kind of let you do this already. I think it's in beta still, but that just kind of superimposed clothes on you, and you had to kind of hold
Sure.
a position. You're saying like this would be the step beyond that, where you could actually kind of move and
Exactly.
okay,
Exactly. I think there's with cloth simulators in CG where you're able to set up physics based in your world and put like in films and TV shows and stuff like that. This is already out there and has been the norm for quite some time. You've got this simulation running of what a cloth would do. So when you're in such an AR pod, it could, like when you stand in front of a Kinect, it sort of builds a skeleton and it follows and tracks the movement of your joints. So having something like that reading your movement as you're moving around, you can simulate what that clothing would do. I mean, this would be kind of a no-brainer for dresses, especially because the movement of clothing is really pretty important in fashion. So if somebody steps in and wants to wear a dress and see how it moves, how it reacts to their body, how a particular fabric would
Hmm.
complement somebody's figure and how they walk or whatever. I think this would be something that's pretty interesting. And you've got, real-time rendering technologies, a company I've been involved with in the past, Chaos Group. They have, V-Ray Cloud rendering, for example. It's a photoreal renderer that gives you very quick feedback on how something could look. So working these technologies with cloth simulators, with real-time rendering, with a Connect sort of sensor technology that can read your movement could have you sampling a whole bunch of stuff. And it could also extend, as you were saying, you can enter measurements and get better fitted for clothes.
Right.
This, could also, in a way, sort of scan your body and see what sort of size you are. And there's a tool available in visual effects for quite a few years now called photogrammetry, where you take photos of an object, and this was available to consumers through Autodesk a few years ago. I think it was called 123D, where you can take pictures of an object and you upload it to their servers, and it takes the photos from different perspectives and constructs a 3D model of that. And it's definitely used a lot in the entertainment industry for sure. So that sort of thing could take a look at who you are, your physicality, your body type, your sizes, and find options for you that fit you perfectly. Without having you spend hours in a Nordstrom or a Macy's or a Gap finding something that works for you, or guessing online. You can see something superimposed over your body, but how does it really fit you? How does it fit you when you turn around? How does it move when you lift your arms? Does it, make um, your love handles look better or worse?
Yeah,
And that's,
yeah. It
does it show a plumber's crack? These things need to come up. And I've got a non-standard body type, having packed on a few extra pounds. So this sort of thing is definitely on my mind because it's tough. It's tough for people with non-standard body shapes to go out there and feel super confident in what they buy.
right.
And with stores becoming, sort of under the gun with e-commerce breathing down their necks, I think this is just a natural evolution of these technologies together. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody's working on it right now, and if I had any sort of coding acumen, or if I was in any way intelligent, I'd be trying to do this myself to sell it to these retailers like Gap. But like I said, I'd be pretty
I
surprised if somebody's not on it
Yeah,
already in that way.
I know that you said that this is something that's not strictly VR. If anything, it's closer to augmented reality and things like that.
Right.
But if you could in some way make this multiple user friendly, like if you could, I'm not saying that I do this. I'm not saying that that all women do this, but you know that you could go to the mall with your friends, go clothes shopping, and it's a group activity. It's fun. If you could take the same kind of idea and take this
Hmm.
technology, and hey, your friends could be across the world, and you could go clothes shopping together, and you could see what looks
Absolutely.
better. Hey, you don't have to get rid of the social aspect. It's some people do enjoy that time, going out
Sure.
for hours and shopping. So it do,
Absolutely.
it doesn't have to be
Absolutely.
so isolating. And actually, and just before we move off this topic, because you did make a pretty good segue to this other article that you have about the algorithms and recreating 3D objects right there. But before we move off, I did kind of want to point out that this was, researched by Disney. Disney's doing a lot of research and development lately. And, when I first read this article, it left my mind that it's going to play a huge part in theme parks. Like the idea that you can have a character, maybe you see it on a monitor, maybe you see it in real time through projectors. In some way, you see the character that you're interacting with, and then, like the article says, a donkey comes up and kicks the bench, and the entire bench, kind of shakes and surprises you.
Hmm.
It's a good way to make a simple attraction that much
Absolutely.
more, kind of in depth. So, and you can see things like this with Harry Potter World, where things just kind of move through magic. And hey, this is, magic bench. This is the next best thing.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'd love to see that in Harry Potter world. Family's gone there a few times, and it's always fun to, they have these interactive wands that let you, point at something in one of their storefronts and things move around. I think this is definitely something that's useful in these parks for sure. But I think it'll end up having wider range
Oh, for sure.
implications as well in the online space.
Absolutely. So, like I said, we're going to move on to the next topic. And last time, everyone, if you want to check out these, because, we're not covering all of the implications, the article you link here is pretty good. But computeramerica.com, we have them there. This next one, I'm not sure if it's the same thing as taking multiple pictures and letting a computer extrapolate, a 3D image from it. But you
Hmm.
have here algorithms that can sketch and recreate 3D shapes. And what's exciting about this?
Right. So here's this algorithm, here's this program. What it does is it'll take a 3D model, like a game asset, like a a gun, a prop, or whatever that's already been created in 3D. And what it does is it breaks it down to the simplest form that it can display, sort of like sketch lines. So one of the examples on that article is the model of a computer mouse, and what we as humans need as far as simple sketches
Hmm?
to really understand the volume or the shape of an object. So this mouse, if you're looking at the website, 3D model mouse, that maybe you got on TurboSquid, you made yourself, is now broken down to just a few different lines, about a dozen or so sketch lines. Now, what I think is kind of interesting about this, and what I'd love to be able to see this do, is do the opposite, where somebody can sketch out 3D volume on paper, sort of draw it out with its, the contour lines and silhouettes, and sort of sketch out the volume of an object, and have that become a 3D model. Sort of like that photogrammetry that we were talking about, where you take photos of the same object from different perspectives, and it generates a 3D model based on that.
Right.
I'd love to be able to see an artist sit down and on, pen on paper, or on a Cintiq or Wacom, be able to sketch something out that they're thinking about with, volume in mind when they're drawing it, and have this analyze their sketches and be able to develop a model based on that. I think this is a really good first step. And the population of student I work with runs the gamut of the very digital literate to the traditional filmmaker, traditional artist, and it becomes exciting for those traditional artists that they just want to draw. This gives them a chance to take what they know in sketching
Hmm.
and take that into the world of 3D, as opposed to forcing them to sit down with Maya or Blender or ZBrush to sculpt out in an interface they may not be familiar or comfortable with, be able to draw something, maybe from a couple of different perspectives, and have this algorithm look at their contour sketch lines, be able to say, here's the model that you draw. Here's this mouse that you just drew on your sketch pad. So I think this has a pretty interesting implication, taking it and reversing what they're doing right now, which they probably already have in mind and may be working on. But this is an interesting development, which I think could be a good step towards that sort of 3D creation.
Yeah, and if you're watching the video portion, they link to a video here that kind of shows why it's so exciting, because obviously there's a lot of ways that a computer program, they give the example of a dome, like a half sphere, and if you were to tell a computer program, what shape is this, it would just kind of outline the outline, and it would just say it's a circle. But this program is able to ascertain that this is a 3D object, and it actually draws the contour lines of a dome. And so, something that
Exactly.
it's not just visual, it's actually, creating geometry within the program itself, which is why it's so exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And
It's
I've been fortunate to know a number of artists who can sketch really beautifully and get a sense of volume and space just on a sheet of paper. So I think for that it's really important. And there are some comparisons in that article that show what an actual sketch artist would draw when confronted with, I need this 3D shape. How would you draw it? And the comparison between what the 3D, I'm sorry, between what the sketch artist had sketched out and what this program had spit out of the same model were very similar, and that's exciting and also kind of scary, if you ask me.
Right, yeah, it's scary, and this is the again, this is the topic that comes up with artificial intelligence, and we're gonna delve a little deeper into that here in a minute. But it's the idea that taking something that, as I said before, was in the realm of creativity, which was kind of a hands-off, no technology is allowed in this area kind of field, where the idea that colors are accurate, shapes are accurate, not really shapes are accurate, but things that it took a human eye to kind of say this is right. And now that you can give it to a computer program and they can do it themselves, it's it's scary. It's scary how good they are when no other input is kind of required. And I'll admit, when I first saw this article, I was like, oh, so the title kind of implies that if you give the 3D model, if you give a program, let's say a car, they'll give you essentially the wheels of the car. Like, it strips it down, and that seems pretty simple, but it's actually very complex. And the fact that it could do it itself, do you think this is a bigger time saver? Do you think this is kind of proof of concept, and it's going to go, like you said, in reverse, where you sketch and it makes an object? Where do you think the true implementation of technology like this is going to go?
Well, I think in the end, the usability is going to be a little bit up in the air. And from my thinking about this, I don't see a whole lot of use in taking an existing 3D model and turning it into sketches. There are a number of rendering algorithms and filters that you can use to make a 3D object in CG look like it's sketched out and then it's drawn.
Hmm.
So I don't think there's a whole lot of headroom for yet another way of implementing and making something look like it's been drawn coming out of the computer. I think the real usability is giving artists a chance, a new interface of getting their ideas into 3D versus having to sit there with a mouse and a keyboard and try to recreate what's in their mind. Because a lot of people, a lot of visual artists, like to work just through their hands, whether it's sculpting something or not. And this is sort of like when you make a maquette for a character or a physical clay model of a character. There are ways to digitize that actual clay model into the computer. You can scan it. There's a number of ways to pull positions on that surface to recreate that as a mesh that you can then use in, your film or whatever digital project you're in. I'm hoping that this would end up sparking sort of a new way that people can instead just draw, instead of sculpting 3D volumes, draw a few different, I guess, what am I looking for? The perspectives of an object, and have this algorithm figure out the geometry that at least can get them inside of a CG scene,
Right.
again, without having to go in there and actually use the tools to create a polygon mesh themselves. So I see this as a new interface type that'll open digital 3D workflows to more people that may not be that interested in learning a whole new subset of tools
and just
and new way
everyone
of
will have to pause
thinking.
it right there.
We
Computer
are
America.
all Brother Wolf. 10 years ago, a group of locals banded together to create positive change. We took animals into our homes, held adoption events at local retailers, and talked to the community about our mission to help build a no-kill Asheville. A decade later, we have achieved so many victories for animals in need. There's been so much progress, yet there's still so much to do. As part of our year-long celebration, we encourage you to become a member of our special Compassionate Circle program. With a monthly donation of $10 or more, you will have behind-the-scenes access to the work we are doing at Brother Wolf. Our goal is to reach 1,000 members because we receive no government funding. Working together, we can help build and sustain no-kill communities. Learn more at compassionatecircle.bwar.org. We are a 501c3 tax-deductible organization.
And welcome back to the Computer America Show. It is 31 minutes past the hour as we continue on here. And, of course, Dariush Derakhshani, I apologize. I thought that multiple times during that last sentence you were going to wrap it up, and then, you kept going. But it's okay. We're back. Computer America, Dariush Derakhshani, everyone. And, yeah, we're just wrapping up this article about algorithms that can sketch an object and recreate 3D objects because, like we were saying, it's, it's not the most straightforward thing for a computer program because they can make a lot of, very subtle mistakes that can, kind of mess up the real contours of a 3D object as a person would sketch it. And like you were saying, Dariush, if you could work this in reverse, if this is a way that you could, apply 3D contours and a program could kind of say, that one contour line is enough for me to recreate this object. It's, I'm sorry about that. I had you on mute. There we go. Dariush, can you hear me? Oh no, Dariush, where'd you go? Oh, call drops. I'll do it. Everyone, 1 second. Dariush Derakhshani coming right back. There we go. So, Dariush, I think we got you back. Can you hear me?
I can indeed. How are you?
All right, perfect. Yeah, perfect. So, call drop, but that's okay. Everyone, we're again back with Dariush Derakhshani, and we were just wrapping up this article. And I apologize, but for cutting you off there at the end. But was there anything else about this, this idea other than, in your mind, kind of reversing this and letting, more traditional artists get more in depth into technology, or did you want to move on to the next article?
Yeah, no, I think that pretty much sums it up, and it segues into one of the other articles that I sent you about colorizing images. A long time ago, Turner Broadcasting, many, many, many years ago, really set out to colorize black and white films and turn their library into more of a up-to-date and get more people interested in watching older films. People that may be like, I'm not going to watch that. That's black and white, So there's a lot of information out there about deep thinking and how a computer would basically learn from what's going on, its environment, its processes, and be able to adjust and evolve the way it thinks and computes things. So one of the articles I was reading was about how there's this push where they can take black and white images and start colorizing them with minimal to no user input, where it can take a look at an image and decide, oh, that's skin, or that's a shirt, or that's hair, or that's an object X, Y, and Z, and be able to colorize it, taking it from black and white into something that looks a little bit more up to date. And that in me sparked a kind of a thought of object recognition. What is the thing in our brain, in our experience as humans, that allow us to look at something visually and be able to identify that. So if you put your hand up in front of your face, what is the mechanism in your thinking that allows you to separate that hand and identify it as a hand versus all the other stuff that you see right behind your hand? So with computer algorithms, one of the things that would be really beneficial to my industry in visual effects is being able to identify objects as objects and being able to cut them out of the background and individualize things like this. And one of the big uses of that would be with green screen and blue screen technology, where
Hmm.
you put an actor in front of a green screen, and then you're more easily able to extract them and put them into a different location, like fighting a robot, for example, that's animated in CG. There's a lot of implications to being able to shoot that actor instead of against a green screen, shoot them against the live background of where that actual robot fight will be, and have this algorithm being able to extract that actor out of that background easily and with really good confidence, as opposed to either using that green screen or sending it out to other artists to manually rotoscope or mat that person out by drawing lines around them frame by frame. So I think that there's a lot of implications there, and one of the things that I've discussed with some of my teaching colleagues is the idea of cameras that have depth sensing to them, which are in development, where you capture the scene in the camera, but it
Hmm.
also captures how far away from the camera an object is, which is a really important step to being able to identify what one object is versus an object that is behind it or intersecting it.
Sounds a lot like the technology behind Lytro and what made that,
Right.
admittedly kind of a gimmicky for kind of the end user, the way they were trying to use it. But we found that a lot of, other cameras and other camera systems, and I'm sure even to some point movie cameras, are looking to implement that technology into their cameras so they could do exactly what you said. It on a consumer basis, it's kind of a neat trick where you can take a photo
Hmm.
and change the uh, not sharpness, change the I'm sure that you know the term better than I
Hmm.
would, but I guess for movie making that would really help even in traditional green screen settings, being able to film multiple people at the same time and
Right.
not have to worry about is the shot ruined because it was out of focus. Changing the focus. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. Um,
Changing the focus. Yeah,
right.
absolutely. And that is definitely a nice, as you put it, kind of gimmick that people can use. I think a wider range implication of this sort of thinking is in AR. So let's say you're wearing something like a Google Glass, and you're superimposing information on that glass about your environment. But if that information or whatever graphics are being projected onto your glasses could be even more intrinsically combined with your environment. For example, you could have a character surprise you by coming around the corner or coming through a doorway that's actually physically there, as opposed to just being stuck on there like a sticker with no thought as to the things that are between it and you. And that brings a whole new level of, oh my gosh, what's going on around me when you put, virtual reality. And I
Yeah.
think that's something where VR and AR really need to merge to really blow people's minds, is putting things that are digital behind things that are real.
Right.
And that will make an amazing experience for so many different segments. And one of the obvious implications ends up being training, sports training, military training, things like that, that keep people safer than they would be if they're doing an actual live fire
Yeah.
drill, where a suspect or an enemy threat would be digital, but inside an actual room that you're in, running around from door to door, and not have not have an actual person behind that door jumping out at you.
Right.
So I think there's a number of different things, as well as if you have Pokemon Go and your Pokemon are actually hiding behind a tree that's right in front of you, makes things more exciting. So I think there's a lot of computational power, obviously, to some point to figure out. But I think the implications of drawing these things together is pretty interesting, but also really kind of scary. We discussed this a little bit earlier, the idea of AI and deep learning and what this could mean for us. And if you've been kind of keeping a tabs on the news, Elon Musk from Tesla, for example, or Solar City, has been kind of saying this is sort of dangerous. AI could be dangerous. And if you watch science fiction, Terminator, it certainly is something to think about. What would happen if these deep learning machines sort of figure out we don't need humans anymore? We would be better off in a world like the Matrix,
Yeah.
where we're using people as batteries at that point. So I mean, that's kind of a dramatic turn, obviously, but there are definitely some ethics to consider in what this technology is going to end up. I mean, it'll be super
So
duper cool, and
yeah.
Pokemon Go would be one evolution above what it is now, for example, or other games. But there is that thought of we're really starting to mess with people's realities and recreating
The role of the
realities.
person, right? Yeah, and a few,
Absolutely.
yeah, and a few things to kind of add here. I just saw it was like a 10-minute long documentary on, well, kind of just a video on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and I think everyone should be pretty familiar with that film, and it talked about essentially what you're saying, but that was in a time when every scene had to be hand drawn,
Right.
and the cartoon characters had to do that, but I think what made the movie last so long and is still, watchable today, kind of like, of course, Jurassic Park, is how
Hmm.
they mixed the animated with the physical.
Right.
Like when they had Roger Rabbit, he was, kind of shaking him and putting him into a sink, and he pulled him out of the sink, and he was spraying water into the actor's face, and the water
Right.
was real. you know, if you could see it without the animation, it was kind of like a robot with a tube and it just kind of sprayed it into his face. But being
Right.
able to blend the physical with the animated, makes a movie that's even 30 years old at this point still, still enjoyable, still watchable. And if you can do that on the fly without that much work, without hand drawing every single slide, you're going to make much, much deeper connections between what's real and what's
Absolutely.
fake.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it must be at least 9, 10 years ago, I wrote an editorial in some publication about the implications of image manipulation and video manipulation. And if you think way back to the early 19th century, World War I started because of an assassination
Mm-hmm.
of an actual event. And, I wondered in that editorial piece, what would happen if that event was faked? For example, an assassination is caught on videotape or caught on somebody's cell phone or multiple people's cell phones, like the Zapruder film with JFK. With the proliferation this last year and this election cycle, no matter which side of the political spectrum you're on, there's a prevalence of fake news and a lot of convincing people as outside of their normal thinking with some fake information to try to change people's actions. And if that is, effective with written media, where somebody is just like, here's a news column that's not actually news that says X, Y, and Z about how you feel will change and how you act or how you vote will change. So if it's that effective with just an article, imagine how effective it would be if you create a convincing human inside a video that creates some sort of firestorm that isn't really actually caught on tape. And you hit the nail on the head with Roger Rabbit. It took a very huge concerted effort over a long period of time with many, many artists
Hmm.
working to make that interaction work. We're getting to a point where human humans are starting to get more and more convincing in CG, and there are for sure government agencies that are convening panels and having closed door discussions about the implications of these things with digital artists and saying, what is the capability of a regime to be able to do that in an animated video. When you take that a step further and introduce the whole idea of a real time engine being able to make that real human appear in front of you when you have an augmented reality headset on, it becomes a little strange because you're literally manipulating people's perceptions. Now, on the good side of the coin, this could be very therapeutic for people. Lots of mental health, emotional health issues could be helped by putting a person into a state of mind where they feel safe and they feel like they're healing by altering their perception. A lot of studies have been done with sufferers of PTSD and veterans coming back from horrible experiences where their brain chemistry is being altered, like ecstasy, for example,
Yeah.
being given to PTSD to relieve some of their anxieties and fears. If we're able to have their perceptions, what they're seeing through AR, guide their brain into thinking and finding a calm space, it's huge. And my wife works with adults on the autistic spectrum at a school here in LA that teaches animation VFX to, again, adults on the spectrum. It has a big implication where AR could help people who have difficulty with social cues augment that sort of feedback and input that they're getting from the real world, where it will help them interpret social cues so that they could feel less isolated or less awkward in situations. So there's a lot of beautiful therapeutic things that can come from manipulating or augmenting a person's actual perception of what's happening, but there's also that sort of sinister side, and you can't have good without the bad. So I can't help but start thinking, what could
You
happen. And you look back on short stories like from Phil K. Dick and other, Asimov and all these things that have been in the science fiction lexicon. They're becoming reality, and there are things that we need to address as ethics in society. How far do we want to go? How do we keep Skynet from turning around and deciding that their view, the deep learning view of the future of the planet, is better than our humanistic view of it? So, not to sound alarmist, but these are definitely things I think more people educate themselves on and develop their own opinions and thoughts and start sharing these things out there. I think it's important, and it's so bloody relevant because of the things that we've been hearing about Facebook and fake news and influence campaigns. Because many years ago we had to do that, manually, and when a government wanted to topple another regime, they sent people there to do it. They sent people to actually influence other people and bribe and things like that. And now it's becoming a lot easier to turn tens and hundreds of thousands of people's views around based on non-existent and flimsy data. So this is
and
just
yeah.
possible to really push that.
Yeah, and I mean, your example, way at the beginning of that, where World War One was started by the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. I don't know why I remember that, but I think that's what happened.
It's one of those things from school,
Yeah, I know it just sticks in there, and but at any rate, you don't even have to go that far back. Like you could imagine, with all the tension happening with North Korea and sending. Oh yeah, and sorry about the connection. It should be settling out here soon, but of course, think about all the tensions with North Korea, and if you were to some reason isolate, Japan, because let's face it, the internet is a series of tubes, and you can cut those tubes, cut off the flow of information from Japan
Right.
and make a convincing CG rendering of, a nuke actually landing in Japan.
Right.
That could start, World War III. It's not, if my stupid brain could come up with it, it could definitely happen. So it's something
Absolutely.
you'd have to definitely worry about. And it's going to continue to be a thing because it's not that easy to fact check, especially for the individual person. So
Right. Right.
skepticism definitely great. Again, kind of leaning back towards this article about colorizing images with deep neural
Hmm.
networks. It's but this is kind of what a lot of companies that came on Computer America here in the past couple of weeks have said. They can teach them to do things that would take, thousands of people, millions of man hours. They could teach a program to do in a matter of, kind of automated, kind of way.
Right.
It doesn't really
Right.
matter. So AI, as scary and as future prone, and future terrifying as some people, kind of want you to believe, and yes, it can definitely go that way. What AI companies are trying to say over and over again, at least here on Computer America, is they're more likely, instead of going to cause the end of society as we know it, they're going to free people up. They're going to free, creative, people up from having to say, this is wood, this is, this is water, this is glass. And it's going to free them up to do other things, more fulfilling things, rather than, doing this kind of grunt work
Absolutely.
that we can give it
Yeah.
to programs.
Absolutely. And that's sort of the double-edged sword of technology. Again, the analogy back to World War One, that was the first major conflict that was mechanized. The tank, the machine gun, all these things really changed the landscape of how war is fought. And we're seeing that now, where now we have an intellectual and information wars,
Mm.
and battles online. So it's just a natural evolution, and you can't really stop technology because, as I mentioned before, there's going to be so many great educational and therapeutic uses of this kind of technology. And I think it's not so much about making people panic and start freaking out and stocking up on canned goods and digging out a bomb shelter in their backyard. It's more about just raising the overall consciousness, having people around them, raising a or conversation about, hey, where do we want this thing to go? Because as a people, we steer our own futures, and we governments, at least we're fortunate enough in many countries to be able to do that. So the more we ponder these things, the more we discuss this with our friends and get on Facebook and say, hey, what do you think of this article? What do you guys think of that? I think it is better for technological advance. Whereas, with something like the tank or the machine gun in World War One, boom, it's there on the. Yeah. So I think in a lot of ways, we want to progress and see what these things can do to help us while having a healthy discussion and, well too far we want to draw on. How do we keep those things in check so that, we end up, in the matrix being down by robots.
Right. Yeah. And by the way, I know that the connection here is getting a little spotty, but we're going to try to do our best here to kind of finish this one out here because we only have a few minutes, and if we can kind of steer the conversation to something a little bit more kind of current day, and I kind of wanted to get your idea on it because the new iPhone, yeah, I know an abrupt
Right.
change, but it's a combination of the new Face ID that I think everyone has heard of. They're replacing Touch ID with Face ID, whether you love it or hate it. And a technology that is falling out of that is the idea that you can have animojis. And I think to a lot of people it looked silly, it looked gimmicky, it looked kind of stupid. But I will say that to do something like an Animoji, an animated emoji, just 3 or 4 years ago, took a pretty beefy computer to do it in real time with your face and a webcam. And now that you can do this on your phone, it's, what do you think this kind of, leads to with the idea of capturing 3D images and changing, kind of changing them on the fly with even a phone? Because again, it's $1,000, but it's still one of the more limited pieces. It's still one of the more limited pieces of computer we have our fingers on, and even they can do real-time rendering and real-time, animation.
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty sweet. I think it's kind of, it touches on what we've been talking about this. It's taking a look and deriving your feeling and putting that into your emoji and animating. And I think that's really, because the wonderful side of that is some of that research that I mentioned before, where people on the autistic spectrum can have an augmented reality, social cues on how people are based on their face looks like. And for those that may not be familiar with autism that much, one others feel, which puts them in an isolated position where they're not sure how to pick up on these cues when somebody is perhaps sad to hear of some news, or they're sharing, or what's going on with them. Their brains don't work the same way. So being able to say, hey, this person looks sad, you might are on the spectrum, how you're, what you're saying, or how you're, to kind of, their brain doesn't perceive that by itself. These have got to be at least related, if not sort of a product of that sort of research, where it can kind of gauge. I've been in many situations where an email was perceived in the wrong, doesn't travel well online. So this might be an interesting way, context to what you're putting out. And you can put a smile. If you're actually laughing out loud, that'll be kind of that emoji straight to that person, where they know you're actually laughing out loud.
Right, and
I think, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have to kind of say it here. Everyone, again, we apologize. It's probably with our system, and the internet connection is just not strong enough. But Dariush, before we let you go, I want to say thank you so much for, of course, doing this. I know this was you've been very, very busy, and yeah, we'll leave you to the rest of your day. But Dariush, Derakhshani, visual effects supervisor and professor in Southern California. Dariush, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure, man.
All right. And of course, there he goes. So everyone, if you want to check out that or more, you have all of the information at your fingertips at computeramerica.com with, again, with links to any articles, any videos that we talked about. We try to make that as audio optimized as possible. I know that, of course, it can be a little troublesome when the internet does not want to play along, but there you have it. And everyone, there you go. Another episode of Computer America. I hope you all enjoyed that and are looking forward to, of course, Derakhshani here in the future. So, in the meantime, everyone, have a great day. Thank you so much for tuning in. And let's see, joining us tomorrow on the show should be our All Linux program. That's right, with Marcel Gagne. It'll be a lot of fun, and it will, it'll be great. So, everyone, if you're interested in Linux at all, check it out, computeramerica.com, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern, every single day. Oh, and by the way, be sure to check out the contest here for Computer America. And what else should we mention? Well, you can always reach out to Computer America live at computeramerica.com is our email address, or any social media. We keep a tab on that at all times. So Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud, any of that stuff, feel free to reach out. If you have suggestions for the show, if you'd like to hear someone on the program, hey, We have a team waiting just to do just that for you. And in the meantime, everyone, have a great day. We'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.